Tom's way, sir.
You got locked down.
What's that?
You got locked down.
Oh, we did?
I handled it. All right, good morning to everybody. Oh, yes. Good morning to everybody. So, I think we've both done a lot of work in our respective groups and ready to sit through some discussions here. I guess we're gonna do ground rules first. Put those up. Are we equipped to start with that?
Yes. Just need to grab the HDMI cable.
Is that long enough for you?
Yes.
And I'll just start by saying that I think we accepted most of what you wanted. We appreciate your patience and some of the things that had to find arbitration without local counsel with us Monday. Of course, we needed to talk to them about it. None of it was nearly as thorough as I figured it was. So.
Okay. So I think 1, 2, and 3 is taken care of. And I think that we have resolved our understandings and are on the same page about our interest, that you're not gonna be negotiating with our principals, which includes the city council, and we're not gonna be negotiating with any of your principals and so forth. We kind of broke that out to make sure that we were hearing each other and on the same page.
Is it new language?
They tell me that this is what was sent to
Yes.
y'all, that y'all
Okay,
have, and
I
y'all looked
noticed
at
that,
it.
so let me take a look at that.
Okay, because that was my understanding, that this was the ground rules version that you were looking to. We tried to capture what we thought everybody had said at the table. So,
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember, does anybody remember seeing this piece?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just made that. Just want to make sure.
Yes, we sent this the end of day on Monday, and then yesterday, Bob, the only change I made was on section 3, the very last sentence, it says party, it used to say member. That was the
Yeah,
only
I
change
saw
from
that.
yesterday. But as
And
far as,
I'm fine with this, I just didn't recognize it, sorry.
And then I think the only other piece, Becky, was there anything else other than just the number of people on the team?
yeah, we updated it to 11, just to give you a little more leeway.
We did not philosophically agree with your position that you were not a member of the team, so we just increased the size of the
Yeah,
team.
that's fine.
So I don't think we have to agree on that.
No, and the other thing we didn't put in there is I think we have agreement verbally is that we have, especially our new people who just came on, they've already have things they can't, obligations they have to satisfy away from the table. And so our constitution would allow me to appoint somebody to be here in their absence, and we would like to do that. That would help us maintain the quorum of 5, and I don't think it matters to you. We're not
I don't think
double
it matters
stacking
to us. That falls in the category of their prerogative, right?
Just wanted
We're
to
good with
make
that.
sure it didn't surprise anybody.
Because who knows, he may do that with some of us, you know? I mean,
Right.
they may have a new lawyer instead of me.
So we gotta be okay with that too.
And
So, what else? Anything else? that needs to be covered?
really, that's it. The only thing we wanted approval from you, Bob, is the language that you needed your attorney to look at, and I believe that was in.
And I think that's what he just said, that it's been run by and everything was
It's
good.
good.
Yeah, I just want to explain really quick, just, and I'll be
Certainly.
brief, but, you know, classically, the definition of TA would not go to the arbitrator. But then when I talked to some more experienced attorneys who've done this a bunch, they said it's very important to stick with our past practice. Our past practice has been that TAs have been on the road. We think that's very important to progress at the table. And in the end, we're not trying to restrict, I know you're not either, what goes to the arbitrator. So we'll meet and see if we can agree, and if we can't, that's fine. We can take forward what we want.
And we have a point of clarification that we don't think makes a change to this language, because I think we've captured the essence here of what needs to happen. And we had I thought a good dialogue the other day, which I appreciate very much, because it is a learning curve, so to speak. One of one of the devils in the details scenarios that we just went over is, let's say that there are, 5, 6, 7 items that we believe are in dispute, and then you have your list, and you may have some on your list that you've made proposals on these things, we had not agreed to them, or vice versa.
Right.
And in that last, part of the process where we confer and attempt to come to an agreement, we just wanted to clarify that we would expect for you to have the same prerogative, that if we had something on the table, or you did, that we could accept your last proposal, and therefore take that one out of the disputed column.
I think if both parties agree to that, that'd be fine, yes.
Okay, and so we would like to have the prerogative to accept and take out of dispute your last proposal without you changing it, and for you to have the same prerogative with one of ours. So if we had something on the table, then we couldn't pull it away, and say, well, that one's not opening.
So let me make sure I understand. So we have, let's say we propose an article that you have not TA'd.
Correct.
Or even if you did TA, I guess it doesn't matter. And then we're sitting down the last day to decide which articles to forward. You could just accept that article.
We could say, yeah, we're gonna take that one the way you last proposed.
Okay.
And you would have the same prerogative on one of ours.
And we would then lose the prerogative to take it forward if we wanted to.
I think so, because then we would just be agreed on that item.
Yeah. If we agreed on, well, let's just say, this is hypothetical, right? So, because you're right, we're trying to understand the first time through. So we propose something that we're good with.
Right.
But of course, that has to deal with the propensity of the whole argument of the argument too.
Absolutely.
And so we're sitting down the last day, and let's say it was leave articles, to make it simple. We proposed something, you didn't TA it, but that last day, we agreed to that, let's pull it off. We would still probably say, no, we'd like to take it forward because it's part of the grander bargain.
And we're trying to avoid that.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is that as we get to the end, that the proposals we both have on the table are basically our best offer. And then the other side has the prerogative to accept them and take them out of controversy. So that, and to me, it's kind of like an element of the good faith piece. If I was willing to do it during the bargaining cycle, at the end of the game, I shouldn't pull it back or enrich my demand.
But it's kind of along the same lines as when you TA something and decide to take it to the arbitrator, right? I mean, it's almost the same thing, and we don't want to agree to that, So my thought is no, but I'd like to think about it more because I don't want to just dismiss other hand without more thought.
Yeah, I understand.
So let me ask
You say that?
And we're not trying, no, we don't.
Oh,
We
okay.
just wanted to see if we were on the same page about the way this works. Because in the context of a prior TA, we're going to fully disclose to you as we go through these TAs. We're willing to TA on this one based on being able to make a deal at the table. And
Right.
if we can't make a deal at the table, this one may be part of our dispute going forward.
Right.
And so we're not trying to seek any advantage here or put y'all at any disadvantage. If you're gonna change your proposal on something and say, well, we actually want more than our earlier proposal on leave, we just want that to come up before the end.
We do too.
So that both sides can say, all right, here's our check off of what's going forward to arbitration, and we've talked about this for a long time, and, we're willing to take these that you have on the table.
Right.
And an example of that, we're gonna talk about it today, is on the article where I don't remember which one is it that has the chief's discretion on those various prerogatives? Is that-
Personnel.
What's the number, 12? 13, okay. So, as we'll discuss today, the concessions we've historically made in that article were with the understanding that we had operational control and we didn't have to say yes to things that were dysfunctional in the organization. You want us to give up the discretion of the chief on those things, okay? And
So
so,
hope things will become dysfunctional, but yeah.
But-
What we agreed to, we
yeah.
like it to mean something.
yeah, and so we're gonna be sorting through that. And at the end, if we decided, well, we're gonna change our mind and give you a different proposal on the discretion of the chief or something like that, that we could check that one off, but we could do it by taking your last proposal.
I mean, my concern, I think I need to talk to my team, I'm not dismissing, but my
Yeah.
concern would be that when you look at the TA side, we could literally agree, both sides agree, and still take it for the arbitrator. But then on the non-TA side, something we proposed, you could exclude from the arbitrator just by accepting it at that point.
But you still control it by making sure that within that last window, you have a proposal on the table that you're willing to do as is.
Yeah, but I think in terms of bargaining tempo, it's good to be able to make progress by agreeing with things and not have the thought that, hey, there might be a strategy at the end that could change what we intended at the table here. What we intend at the table is going to probably be a different dynamic than what goes to the arbitrator. So I don't like the notion of either side having to be excluded from an offer you made us just because we accepted at the last minute. Now, let me think it through. Let me talk to our attorneys. I don't want to dismiss out of hand, but my initial thought is those would be my concerns I would talk to my team about.
Gotcha.
They may have reasons why we should do it.
And I totally understand the question mark that's in your head, because we all know that by the time we get to that point, we have a package in mind. And there's things that we may be willing to do here that we don't really like it, but we're willing to do it in order to accomplish these objectives over here. And so I think your concern there is, I want to make sure that I'm not at a disadvantage if you get to cherry pick some things that are on the table outside of my package picture.
Exactly.
We actually think that there's two objectives here. Both of us want to position ourselves in, if we end up in arbitration, with a package that is logically and internally consistent and so forth. At the same time, if there's things that we can get out of the way that are acceptable to us, as long as we both know the rules at the end, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it just seems like us mutually agreeing to exclude something would be better, because now we have the context of the entire bargaining cycle, with us.
So, if you take away what Lowell said today, walking into today, how did you anticipate the TA system working in the event we get to arbitration? You and I, like the two sides talk and we agree, we have to have an agreement on which ones don't go to the arbitrators, and if we can't get an agreement on those, if I think 3 shouldn't go to the arbitrators, you think it should, then automatically
It goes to the
does,
arbitrator.
right? Okay, all right.
And I think we're also talking, there's some good and very good here. I think many articles, we're gonna agree to not take the arbitrator. We both want utility. We don't wanna be bothersome to the arbitrator and a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. And we don't wanna spend any more time there than we need to bring the ruling. So
And we may be able to resolve, just by virtue of process and intention, this issue as we go forward, just by having a conversation about it.
Yeah.
We have these articles open, and if you change your mind on those, then we're good with that.
Yeah.
And you might say, we have these articles open, but as to, 19 and 24, our position may change on that if they're not accepted before next week.
We may develop even a de facto term as we start negotiating. I feel very solid about this one, but I'm not ready to TA it. But we don't need to talk about it again. I think we can figure it out, and I think that's another reason why the relationship is so important.
Absolutely.
And I really hope we can maintain that. And there's going to be times we're going to be disagreeing, but
Yes.
in the end, I think we just need to realize in the end that we have business to do. We need to be respectful and work through this as best we can.
Indeed. And we are certainly committed to that. All right. So anything else? I think that was everything that we had to discuss on these, right?
So Lowell, would you like us to consider that still, or are you good with this current language?
We're good with the current language.
Okay.
I think that discussion is all we needed to have. We weren't even looking for making a change here. I think that our fearless leader here recognized that, we have an understanding of how that would apply in this scenario, and we just wanted to see whether we had the same understanding.
Neither of us need to be hiding behind the law and jump out the last minute with some sort of weird change, And I think this helps us.
Mighty good.
So I'll clean it up and put it in a final form.
Yeah, can we go through it a little bit more?
Sure.
The section on the media particularly, and then the last miscellaneous section I wanted to discuss. The press conference thing, we kind of said that we would rather have it where it was more permissible as long as we gave things in advance. This seemed to be a very important thing to y'all. And maybe because your recent experience with some other bargaining units, and so we're agreeing to it. We're fine with your language. And I hope you can take that as a gesture of goodwill. We don't plan on doing this sort of thing.
Mighty good. I certainly do.
So I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. I appreciate that kind of approach to this, and
And then it was, I think G2 was the other item. And this is the last thing I need to comment on. And so we put this in front of our attorney, actually 2 attorneys, and they explained it to me. I didn't understand it. So basically what they told me in the end was this is hyper legal language that doesn't do a whole lot, but does offer some protections just to be super safe. So law officers, I mean, you've already explained this once. Can you explain the purposes one more time, please? Maybe a way I can understand it.
Well, what I don't think either side wants to do is, having structured this process based on the existing law in the state of Texas, and having gone through the referendum process with the constituents here in Austin to create this arbitration process, in the context of the city council's resolution about how that will go forward, and the fact that there is a potential misunderstanding, dispute, whatever you want to call it, about the ultimate legal parameters for the referendum, that everybody's going forward in good faith with this process like the resolution says, and that what we do, either by adoption of ground rules or by going through the process, doesn't change other legal rights that you or the city would have.
Right.
So,
I think a stipulation agreement
yes.
helps that. And so we could have, I believe, we could have passed the resolution fairly easily without adding that. We spoke with the mayor about that because we felt it was a fair thing to do. If the city manager agrees to go forward and follow the resolution, we don't want any prejudicial arguments to burn in court. We are, without the agreement, I promise we wouldn't, but with the agreement, it makes it very clear.
Absolutely. Okay. I think we're understanding all these things the same. Okay.
We're ready to TA then.
Mighty good. We will get that done in a final form and get it to you later this morning. And then we are prepared to go through the articles that we discussed the other day and explain where we are and give you counter proposals and so forth.
And then we sent something over for, and this is probably going to be included in that, but I want to say it really quick. I think it's a good example of what happens on the recognition of the association. Matt changed some words. He didn't really, I think his main purpose was to make something plural. It was really plural earlier on. And you all thought maybe this is a substantive change. You should be critical of these things. So we have 3 different sets of language you could accept now, essentially. And again, just to kind of show, we're not going to hide behind the law and stuff, right? We're not going to try to fool you with some language. We're going to lay out what we're intending so we can have a good bargaining session and get a deal to the table, okay?
Yeah, we saw your email that sent both those, a couple of new versions over, and then we have our own, so I think we probably are meeting somewhere in the middle with our own, but we can go over that.
Yeah, if you got something different, we'll just have to run past our attorney, but it's a pretty benign article for the most part.
I'm gonna go ahead and start with one.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is Article 1, Bob, and you can see here in the comment that we're rejecting this language right now because it refers to the charter amendment. Obviously, it refers to the binding interest arbitration, and we just had a discussion about that. We've got the signed agreement, the stipulation and agreement. So that's, I think, resolved. The purpose of the agreement, it's got, we're going to have a harmonious relationship. We're going to work together. The mission of both parties coming together for this agreement. So we just didn't feel that this language is really necessary in the contract just at all, and especially in the purpose of the agreement. So that's mainly our position for Article 1.
So the reason I included it when I'm reading the contract, if you look at the first whereas, aren't they very similar? They're both actions of the voters. They're explaining what occurred and helps us, in the preamble, it seems like that you just kind of lay out how we got here. And that's why we thought it was important to include, just for,
I think
historical context.
I think the context of the council resolution, the agreement that we made, this is arguably undermines what's there.
In what way?
Well, just because it says, that's an accomplished fact and that's the new status, where there's a potential dispute about whether or not that is the new status and whether or not it's absolute and whether or not it ends up being an issue for a court to resolve in whole. So that's the concern that, on the one hand, we've signed on the agreement that we're going forward, and that's a possibility in the future, you know, and it may or may not happen. And this kind of says it doesn't exist, that potential dispute doesn't exist.
What part of that tells you it doesn't exist?
Well, just because it says that the initiative referendum is the outcome.
It is an outcome.
Right. But it doesn't
Can't be a final.
but it doesn't say anything about the other issues that are articulated in the negotiated agreement that has us going forward.
Right, it's silent on those, right? So this just is a objective fact. The citizens voted it in to amend the charter. This was the section, and added binding interest arbitration as a dispute resolution procedure. But this is a stated fact. We're not talking about
And
anything
you know, our
else
other
other than
alternative-
stating a
Right,
fact.
but our other alternative is to add to this language, the language that's already in the resolution about the other possible scenario. Okay? In order to satisfy the concern that you're already familiar with, that you've gone over with the mayor and everybody's talked about, which is, well, Judge, you know, the city right here in the contract said this is the answer and the outcome. And so you shouldn't let them make these legal arguments that they've got, you know, even though they reserved them over here in the contract, they said we didn't reserve any of them.
Well, it doesn't say that. It just states the fact that it was passed, just like the whereas above, it states the fact that, like the part of this, I think it's very, very focused statement of fact. It doesn't say yay or nay to, I mean, you could literally say, I think chapter 174 violates the Constitution. So we shouldn't have that in there either. I have some arguments I could make. I think there's some dispute in it, you know? And so, I mean, it's not probably the biggest deal in the world. I think I like it there because it's a statement of fact, but it certainly doesn't indicate or take away any of your rights under the law. And we would never intend to do that. This may be the thing that takes us to final arbitration.
So you had just talked about Article 3. This is our proposed language. I think it is a bit of a combination of what you sent over. I did not have a chance to really give a full look because it was kind of sent right before we walked in. But this sort of serves our purpose in that is not to make the association necessary part of disciplinary agreements between a firefighter and the fire chief.
I think that's very close to one of the renditions.
Mhm.
I think the
It's
first
very
one, I think
close.
they also put, in the second one, put in individual
wanna
firefighters,
say-
makes it very clear.
I want to say it's really close to this version, but again, I to just ease my mind, I want to give it a closer look than a couple minutes
Okay.
from when you.
So I have no doubt whatsoever that we are trying to wordsmith exactly the same
I think
outcome.
you're right.
Right.
So look at our stuff and
You bet.
come back to how you want to do it, and I bet it'll be okay, but let's just.
Okay.
On an initial appearance, this version looks very close to the one that I just popped up, so I think we're very, very close.
All right. Well, let's,
There's a subject plural disagreement there where it says a disciplinary.
Right.
Oh, no, there's not, because it has a and it's singular.
And
To a disciplinary agreement singular between a firefighter and the fire chief. Okay, and I can understand where Matt's coming from there, is that multiple disciplinary agreements might be an association thing, whereas an individual disciplinary case where we have a resolution with an individual firefighter, y'all don't have to be a part of it.
right,
Much like the similar issue that got, arbitrated in San Antonio about whether or not a last chance agreement had to have the association as a party or not.
right.
So, which I suspect that you probably would just as soon avoid. I don't know that, but that's
Right.
my guess. All right.
Well, send us that wording, if that's the wording you want to offer to us.
Yes.
We'll take a look at it.
Yeah. I think we're there on that one, but in terms of our purpose.
I bet so too. Let's just send it over, we'll
Right.
go through it.
this one's 7. So, we've added some language at the top here. The association agrees to defray the actual cost of making such deductions, not to exceed the per deduction amount paid by the other employee associations. Again, we're trying to get some uniformity between the associations, and I know you had added some charities and organizations. But right now we're like I said, we're trying to not move forward with additional lists, but just kind of keep it mainly consistent with the other associations. But I think we're pretty close here. As far as the information request, now it's struck out right now, but it's not that it's a full rejection at this moment. We're considering it, but what we're learning and what we need to get a little more information on from our city side and legal is that we're trying to get a more uniform process for all these types of requests. And not that we have any, we want to give you all the information that you're entitled to, of course, but there's just, the PIR department is just inundated with requests, and we're trying to just get a consistent process. And so we're considering it. We've struck out this language for right now, but that's sort of our explanation for that.
That change that you saw, Bob, what I've been told is that the law that changed citywide 2 years ago. We were getting too many PIRs going in various departments. We were getting complaints from certain individuals that when XYZ people ask, they're not asked to pay the cost, but when I ask, I am asked to pay the cost, and that was partially because there was no uniform place for all these PIRs. So this is a citywide initiative that they put into place a couple of years ago to try to be more consistent citywide. So that's why I think you saw the change, and that's why other people saw the change as well in how these information requests are processed.
And I assumed it was something like, I didn't assume they were picking on us or anything. I figured it was something like that.
It's a compliance issue as opposed to.
But I also think you could fix that with the contract, and if we can agree upon something that adds utility. Remember, this is every 2 weeks. And I know there are certain things like standing PIR requests. And so, maybe we can fashion it that way, moralizing the contract, but it's recurring business that happens every 2 weeks. And if there's a problem, we need to be able to correct that timely. And we have for many years very well. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're not trying to break any rules, but to the extent we can get back to the past practice that was more efficient, we memorialize it, we sure would like to do that.
And we got to talk to the controller too, controller in conjunction with legal. I don't know if it was your union or another group. It might have been Ashley Police or Fire or EMS or frankly anybody else. But there was a concern that some of the payroll data going out had information that we weren't maybe supposed to be given about individual contributions, where one person decides to include family on their health insurance or not, or where one person decides that I'm going to donate to this entity or not, whether or not that's information you're actually at liberty to hand out to folks. So either way, but we'll get you more information.
Tim's the guy that receives it. I don't think that's the type of information we ever received those type of requests.
Can I just add something, Bob?
I don't know, you're a new resource, we gotta get permission from the other side to speak.
Is that okay?
Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely.
So
This is information about the way this has been working, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
So, in this case, the reason why this arises is that at times people are taken off payroll, and I find out once I'm processing payroll that they aren't being deducted. So in the past, I would just call someone. I didn't ask for details. I just said, are they on leave? There was no details with it. Now I was told, and like you said, it was probably 2 years ago, I couldn't get that information. My concern is there are people that have dropped out of the union. There was one case, it never came through our association. So then I asked, can I please see the deduction form? And I was told that I could not get that because that was private. So our concern is, are these sheets that are being turned into payroll properly authorized by the union or not? Because we don't see it.
And that's what we're trying to run down.
Yeah. And so all we're trying to do is figure out, is it someone that's just on leave and that's fine, we don't have a case? Or is this someone that actually dropped out? And we'd like to talk to them because they never went through Bob. And we want to make sure that that's something that's the right decision for them to do.
Yeah, the authorized firm was supposed to talk to us so we can do it.
Sorry for interrupting.
It falls through the cracks sometimes, that's why it'd be good to correct it quickly if we could. And I think it'll save everybody's time, actually.
So we're still running down just some more
Appreciate
intel on that. And thank you for that information. The indemnification language is also another thing we're doing with the other associations. Just basic, the association agrees to indemnify the city and hold harmless against any and all claims, demands, or suits that may arise out of any actions taken for the purpose of complying with the provisions of this article and those deductions. Again, it's just consistency across the board we're trying to do with the other departments.
And so could you provide an example of
Yeah.
what that might be, what that might look like?
So there's a real example, and there's a hypothetical one. It does. I'm looking at the list that you guys have. It doesn't, you don't have kind of the same ones that, for example, police has. But for example, police has the authority to also do some life insurance one. That their members. What happens if the APA president says, you know what, we're no longer associating with this life insurance company? City of Austin take them off completely.
Right.
That their member was thinking that they're still getting life insurance. Now, when something happens and they don't get the benefit because the union decided we're going with a different entity, we don't want that individual police officer suing the city saying, hey, I thought I was paying dues. No, this was in the contract. This was your union has the right to change these, entities out, and they made that decision. So that's, if you have a problem with that entity being changed out, that's not on us. The other example, frankly, is from EMS, as you are well aware. They had an issue with CLEAT, so EMS took CLEAT off, and there's a potential argument that some members raised, like, hey, well, I still wanted CLEAT. Well, it's not their call, it's the union's call as to who's on there. So we just want to make it super clear. If we're going to give you this right to add people, change people, then you're responsible for your members' complaints if they're not happy with whoever you changed to or took away or wherever. So that's what we're trying.
What would that mean for us legally and financially? So we decommercialized ours. We're not going to add any commercial entities to it for reasons like this and others. But let's just say a member, decided to sue on some item that was taken off and he still wanted to make it. So are you saying we would cover all your legal expenses? What are we saying here?
We are saying that the association would indemnify the city in litigation where we did what y'all told us to do. So that's between you and your member.
Okay. So like, you guys indemnify us on the hiring article only up to a certain point, like $100,000 or something. You're asking for unlimited indemnification. Is that correct?
It is correct. As a practical matter, I don't think it's a huge exposure to it.
I don't either,
Right.
but it is an exposure to put it in here. That's why I'm trying to quantify it.
Fair question.
I mean, for us, the alternative is, let's agree to which ones go in there, let's agree to the amounts, and it stays consistent for the 4-year contract. And if you want to change it, we get back to the table and change it. But when you want to change it midstream, and you have that sole authority to change it as the union president or as the board or however you guys decide to do it, then when your members say, I didn't think that should have been changed, well then, all we're trying to say is that's not on us. And if you have an issue with that, I mean, you're right, yours is decommercialized. That's not to say you can't add a commercial one in the future.
We won't.
But, I don't really see anybody, one of your members saying, hey, I'm ticked off and I'm suing because my dues stopped going to the AFA Historical Museum, right? Like, I don't think that's really gonna happen, but when you go commercial, it really becomes a big issue. If somebody thought that they were getting X benefit, and then.
What if we agree that we would not add any commercial type of entity list? That'd be a possible solution.
I think, we'll go back and talk. I just gave that as an example. I know none of the unions like it when we give this when we give this answer, because they all want to be treated separately, but we are trying to have some consistency amongst all three.
Yeah, I just want to understand what we're liable for, that's all.
Yeah.
And if there's another way we can do it, we have less liability, because as you all know, sometimes people can file very frivolous things, and all of a sudden we're on the hook to pick up the legal expenses for 10 people who decide to file frivolous things just to be frivolous and mess with I don't know, it just seems like
You have
there's a lot to say.
more control over your frivolous members than we do.
Yeah, I guess, but I guess it is members only, right? So it's a little more limited than the public doing it or something.
Yeah, and the reality is, I think that in the process, frankly, I think the odds of this happening are probably quite low, because y'all are gonna do a very transparent process with your folks, and it's not gonna be a surprise, and, you know, people are paying attention, and it shouldn't be able to happen. In other words, you can control whether or not it takes place in the future. The city didn't do this for a long time, because it wasn't necessary. It's only these recent developments have caused the city to say, well, wait a minute, we have an exposure here for things that we have very little control over. We're being told to do it, and we do it.
I think I would probably want something similar if I were you. I'm just trying to make sure what our obligation is if we agree to this.
So actually, Becky, will you move up a little bit on that?
Sure.
Higher. There. So,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so if you see what's added there, if authority has been given to the association by the employee, either through written agreement or bylaws of the association, that gets to the same issue, if you will. Meaning, if, for example, well, we'll use the EMS example. If, for example, the EMS association tells us to drop cleats, and an employee says they didn't have the authority to do that, then that's between them, whether or not they had the authority in their bylaws or written agreement or whatever, and leave us out of it. You know,
Okay.
we can't control that sort of thing. So that goes along with the indemnification clause. That's
We're
kind of
giving-
the concept there.
Right, we're giving you control to be exercised however you and your members choose to do it. So your member can't come in and say, well, I didn't sign something that authorized this change. Yeah, but our bylaws set that structure up, and that applies to all members.
And you guys are aware that when the member signs the deduction form, it's almost like a mini contract, right? And there are certain things within there
But
that,
don't you do some of them like this, to where you have that prerogative solely under bylaws and it's not in the?
I'd have to look at it, but yes, it's something like that. And I'm just wondering if that satisfies the indemnification part. So I'm gonna get a copy of our form. I'm gonna review it myself. And we may talk about that. I don't wanna waste too much time on this.
Good discussion here, thank you.
It might be another place we could solve some of this is through that contract language on the actual deduction form. And I think in the past, you guys had to approve that form and made changes too, so.
That would not
Review that,
surprise
please.
me, I don't remember for
Yeah.
here. I know that happens elsewhere.
Can we go down to the deductions, piece again, where the costing of the deductions? Thank you. Okay, so, let's go to the historical fund. What you're saying is there might be an actual cost that's lower than the 10-cent cost that you could still assess.
That's correct.
Okay. And how would we establish that?
Has it been done?
Yeah,
The cost of
we did. We'll go back and get the updated one for new membership.
I believe we actually have,
You have one?
I think we actually have the cost calculation.
Yeah, I remember we did this years ago, and that's how I think that's the information I used to take some of these off. We showed how much the city was making and how much it was costing. You know, of course, there's assumptions there that maybe not be as accurate as theirs, but they were making a lot more money than it was costing.
And we're not bargaining to make money.
Right, no, I don't believe that. But it would be good to know that methodology, you know. And I would say it'd be fair. I mean, I don't know. It's fair for the city to support things that are mutual goals, like the Historical Society, the Combat Challenge, or the Burn Fund for, children. It seems like the fire department, the city would be behind those sort of things. They're certainly behind lots of things like that in the community, And so I guess the question would be, why are we being so attentive to costs on something that seems to be such a mutual benefit for everybody?
And it's the same answer as consistency, to where as a policy principle, if associations want to make those choices and their members get those prerogatives to make those choices, the city's not trying to make any money, we're just saying, you just pay the actual cost.
Like we could, I don't want to go too long into this, I won't, I promise, but a combat challenge, many departments pay all the cost for the combat challenge. Our department pays, I think, zero cost, or very low, small cost. We give them some money, and we do this deduction program. And so maybe that's the way that the department could give some cost, where the city is not taking that 10 cents. That's kind of our argument. Because these are really valuable things that represent us well and help recruiting. And we're arguing over dimes, you know, and it's almost, could be considered insulting in some ways, you know. We're trying to do this good work, and we're arguing over dimes. We're just saying, let's not argue over dimes, you know, help us out.
So Article 8, this is our proposal. So we struck out, this would include the city attorneys, because I think, this section does not prohibit civil service director or director of staff or any city attorney acting in advisory capacity to the commission, because I think your language tends to limit that, so we wanted to make it a little more expressly clear. And then there's a minor typo here that we just need to fix, and there was just a random M, and there was no in, so we put the word in there. I don't know if you have any issues with this or for further discussion, or maybe we missed the.
Well, let me make it clear, from our standpoint, we believe this solves your concern about any lawyer for the city in a representative capacity for somebody in a matter before the commission cannot have ex parte contact.
Okay, that's what we're really trying to achieve, so thank you.
So this is the one that I alluded to earlier. We've crossed out the one-way trades, and that is still under internal review. We have a fairly active discussion going on about that, and we're still doing some research on it. We are probably not in favor of it, and just wanted to be forthright with you about it, but we haven't finished our analysis. And so that's still a potential open issue on the maternity alternative duty status. That was neither accepted or rejected at this point, because we are, we're in an analytical phase there.
Okay.
There are a lot of good things about what you're trying to accomplish, but it's complicated, and there's a lot of things to take a look at and to consider and so forth. And so we are very actively looking at that. And I had already indicated earlier in my example, we were talking about TAs at the end. We see this article as having been a set of negotiated improvements for the convenience or benefit of members in the association that do involve potentially restrictions or limitations or whatever on what the fire chief has the prerogative to do in operations. So we think that the discretion of the fire chief is essential for us to be willing to give those things up. And in the past, that had been our historical attitude. We're willing to do that as long as we can do it lots of the time or most of the time, but the chief has the prerogative to say, I'm going to just approve this one. We don't believe that there are spurious or arbitrary or capricious uses of that discretion going on. If there's examples of those kind of things, we certainly are willing to be educated about that. But that was our original underlying premise. And so we want to be willing to say yes, as long as we have the prerogative occasionally, based on circumstances, to say no.
And I respect that. I think that makes perfect sense. There are some examples. I don't know if I want to share them at the table, but I think it'd be better not to. And they're not like, and most things work very well day to day. So I'm not trying to say that the world is horrible.
Right.
And I do think that if we can define what those exceptions are, in some manner, not just a blanket exception, but in extreme circumstances, or whatever that language is, that's helpful too, especially when new administrations come and go. That's very helpful context to add. I appreciate that you are candid about how you struck C, the one-way trade, but you're still looking at it. And because you're still looking at it, we'll try to provide you more information to help in your analysis. And I'm also thankful how candid you are about Section 4. You're looking at it very seriously, but you're not agreeing to it. Obviously, there's some complications. Joya knows that very well, but we appreciate you guys keeping those as open items for now.
Right.
And we have women firefighters that couldn't come in and testify. I think that was,
We don't like testify. We like resource information.
Resourcing, okay, whatever, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll probably continue to say testify because it's in my head, I'm sorry to get out of it. I think,
You're reading too many law books, Bob.
pardon me?
You're reading too many law books.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
I watched, I'm a terrible reading people, but I watched Joya listen to testimony. It seemed like there were a couple aha moments where she really got it. And I know she was serious about trying to solve the problem. It's just a very complicated problem. So we could bring in resources to talk in testimony like fashion.
Yes.
If that's valuable
Well
to you.
said.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah, and this is an essential evolution and improvement in our society in public safety units, and we're pleased to see y'all working on through and doing the right things. And legal complications, management complications, but the bottom line is facilitating as much as possible, in a service organization, the ability for women to be a part of that workforce and to make a career there, in spite of childbearing responsibilities and complications. Okay.
Especially when they're young and they're in childbearing years. They just don't have the time accumulated. They're making some choices that I would not going to echo them because some maybe bring and you could hear them themselves. But yeah, there's some real problems they're going through and try to juggle both.
Right.
Here we see that there's a comment from Matt.
It's Article 20.
This is Article 20.
Yeah, I really wanted to leave that. I actually left it there on purpose. And I think it's working just fine. But, we do not really have a grievance committee. We do and we don't. I mean, I think I explained this before. The E-Board is a grievance committee. That works fine for us. It works fine for you all.
I think that's probably where we are.
Okay.
The bottom line is, this is an association prerogative. We do have an interest. The only reason that we haven't just decided, yeah, that's fine with us, is that we have an interest in a process taking place on your side of the table. But what process it is not really our business. That's your members' business. The city does want a grievance to go through a process where people analyze the merits of the grievance before it goes forward, because we fully intend on our side to do the same thing. And I think, like you said a couple of times, we don't have a lot of grievances.
Right.
I think historically, for the most part, management and the association have sorted through those things and made sure that only legitimate disputes that need to go forward end up going forward. That's all we're really interested in, and I think it's working. So our inclination is we have an understanding of what's going on and we're comfortable with it and we'll probably just leave it alone. If we needed to tweak language there and, talk about something other than a grievance committee, a process, or, board review or something like that, we could, but I'm not sure we think it's necessary.
Yeah, well, that's great. We brought it up for that reason, also see if management had some efficiency points that they might want to work on, but it's working pretty good for the most part, I think.
Time limits work, I think everything's pretty much okay.
Yeah, they're not too restricted. It's not so bad.
Did I say 21?
will say here on this one, that the city of Austin has for a long time just really kind of had a policy perspective, and even a point of pride that having health insurance that is the same for all classes of employees has been a good thing and something that they believe in, and that frankly the city would like to avoid the problems and the complications and the cost and so forth and so on of multiple different programs that exist in other communities. You're well aware of a number of those. And so philosophically, from a policy standpoint, I think that we are probably opposed to this initiative, and we are still having internal discussions and asking questions, and the team is making sure we are fully up to speed on the history here in the benefits program, as well as the city council's perspective on these issues. So we just don't really have a further response other than to make sure you know that. I think that what I just said is probably not a surprise to you. I think it's probably what you expected, but that's where we are right now.
That's fine. Again, I don't want to take too much time on this either, but it is an important issue for us. But I do want to acknowledge that I think the city does a very good job on health insurance. It's not that we have a bunch of disgruntled people saying we need to get out of health insurance. It's horrible. I'm on the employee committee that helps do it. I think it's a very transparent and vital process. We're just wondering if, since I represent 1,300 people and it's a metro subject part, we're just wondering if we could do better. And it might be, very likely could be, because we're not trying to drive the outcome here. Very likely, if we did the feasibility, we can't do better. I think that's actually a very likely outcome. We'd just like to explore that. And so it's important to us on that regard. I think we should, it's my job to always be looking for better benefits and wages for our members. And our survey results show that our members would like us to look into this. And again, wouldn't it be great in a way if we did an objective search and could come back and say, this is the best deal in town? and I think that's a really likely outcome. So we're not trying to drive a system that pulls out a system. We're trying to answer the question, are there more efficient ways to do it? And that would be a very objective, clear-eyed look at it. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. But that piece is important to us. So just to let you know.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, let me pull up 21.
So you're not striking any of that with TA?
We are working on studying that soon.
Understood.
Ask all the hard questions.
And Bob, you didn't send us the correct number 11.
Yeah, we're still
We still
missing
sent
on
it.
that.
Did it really?
Mhm.
That's amazing. I thought the last time I sent it, I even looked at it to double check it.
So if you can send us that, then we can respond to that one.
Sorry about that. I will make it my highest priority to get that corrected.
What do we have next?
21, I'm just trying to pull it up.
All I sent you was all I sent you was shared communications from City Association.
That's what I said. I was pretty tired one day, so I'm good. We'll see.
for the delay there. Okay, personal development evaluations. I think we're on the same page here, right? So we just kind of reworded your language a little bit. The PDEs are not intended to form the basis for disciplinary actions. Your original language will not be used for disciplinary purposes. I think that obviously the intent is, these candid discussions with the employees as to their conduct and things like that. However, in the event that some disciplinary action is going to arise, there are other ways that will happen.
Yes.
So, and then Lowell had also mentioned too, if there is a disciplinary action, the PDEs might be used to be like, hey, look, this is how good I am as an employee as well. And so we don't want to take that away from.
We verbally agreed to not use them that way 1 or 2 sessions ago. We acknowledge how unvaluable they've been as an assessment tool.
Okay, so what we could just say, do you want it just to be that PDEs by either side just can't be used in disciplinary arbitrations or form the basis? Because I agree with you, they shouldn't form the basis of disciplinary action. We should have a separate track, reprimand, or all that stuff. We don't need to delve into what was said in a PDE. We should have a documented system outside of the PDE process that does that. Okay. All right. So
we want the evaluation to be kind of a safe place.
Yeah.
All right, say that.
We'll clean this up just a little bit and we'll send it back.
So,
But you could literally have 2 going on at once. I could have a performance plan for you, if you're my subordinate, and I could have this PDE. And in the PDE, we can be very candid with each other. And here I'm writing down behaviors, that would lead to a discipline. We're not trying to stop discipline. We're just trying to make sure that there's a place where that officer can have a candid conversation, where it's somewhat protected so they can be candid with each other. And I think that was the.
Were you suggesting we change
We'll
this
go
to
back
where
and
they're
talk
not
about it.
admissible?
Yeah, we'll go back and talk about
Arbitration.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause
That's just another option.
Yeah, I hear what
Yeah.
Bob's saying. You bet.
Yeah, and we're agreeing with that concept.
Okay.
And I think the way you articulated is what we're looking for.
All right.
Is that there are other appropriate avenues where we are in a progressive discipline or, progressive management or personnel improvement or personal improvement plan, whatever it is.
Yep.
I mean, are we learning? Are we paying attention? Are we getting better? That moves in the disciplinary model, but the PDEs is a different environment.
And just so you know, I mean, we made that verbal agreement 1 or 2 sessions ago that they shouldn't be used for an arbitration. And I had a guy recently wanting to use it for something, and I said, we're not gonna do it.
Right.
I mean, we agreed we wouldn't do it that way. We all know it has very little value. I hope the new one has more value, but the old ones didn't, and we're just not gonna play that game.
Well, and I'm fully aware of and appreciative of the fact that, you spent a good bit of your career doing exactly what you're talking about.
We want good firefighters, right?
And you want knuckleheads to listen up and learn.
We want good organizational behaviors. How can we get it?
We don't have anything further on our end. I think that covers all of the articles. So we'll go back and look at Article 3, the different versions of 3. The TA, we gotta, clean up the TA for the ground rules.
We will try to actually send you Article 11.
Good.
Okay.
It's like a fourth attempt, so maybe I'll get it right.
We'll come down to your room and declare victory
Yeah.
if we get it.
Yeah, hooray. And then we're gonna try to identify other articles that we can be working on, that we can work up to an offer soon.
You bet.
As in later today, or as in?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we just starting the process when we go back to Rome.
There we
So.
Thank y'all so much.
Try to build this whole ordinance like nothing.
How'd it go?
The only thing, like you said, Bob, it would be good if it would be a split drive.
Oh, I can
Good.
figure out how to do that.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'll tell you
That's the
what.
way it felt.
Yeah, so can you, but I mean, there's some YouTube videos on it, very easy to do. I learned it in like 5 minutes.
I'll look it up.
We don't have any of those technical difficulties, do we?
Never.
I'm still just running this on 486. Used to roll wire the bottom up.
And the negative button.
Yeah, hit that button one more time, just go down one and it'll get fine.
There you go.
Is that big enough? I really want to make it a little bigger.
Please don't.
So, and number,
Are we ready to go?
it
Not
just
yet,
collapsed
not yet.
again. There it goes. This touchpad is a little too sensitive, I guess.
Okay.
All right.
So number 3, you guys say 11, but you have spelled out 9.
Good point.
Good point.
You can see that?
Yes, we can see that.
I don't know, it could be 11.
I won't let you testify, so now you're gonna cross-examine me instead.
I haven't read a few legal books. Under process, I thought we had, I don't know why it keeps doing that, apologize. Is that better now? Pretty good.
It's good.
Under process, I thought we agreed that we would meet together in the end and try to discuss what would go forward. It didn't stop anybody, but it seems like that language had been removed from the version we discussed. You can touch it then. So in this version, we printed out for us under process. In the event of impasse, each party shall retain the right to identify issues. And in this one, we talked about parties will confer. Again, I'm not touching the thing, I don't know why it's doing this.
Yeah.
It says the parties will confer, and I thought that's what we originally agreed on at the table, is we would meet and confer, but it wouldn't restrict anybody from taking any articles for they
And
want.
that's the way it appears in what's printed, right?
No,
No, I think what we did is we took out that sentence just because, yeah, well, that's that. With an attempt to come to an agreement as to which issues are in dispute. I mean, just because we thought that's what the 60 days are for. We're trying to figure out which issues are in dispute. But we don't mind meeting again one day just to say, hey, here's our list of articles that we're going to submit, and then you do the same thing. That's fine with us too. It's just, I think to say we're going to try to come to an agreement as to which ones are in dispute, that's what we're doing over the next 58 days. Right?
Well,
And so the last part there, where we're proposing to take out, the thing about waiving the right to confer. That's not to mean that we are not wanting to do that and intend to do that. The first sentence says, in the event of impasse, each party retains the right to identify issues that are in dispute for purposes of arbitration. And so that's,
This is not the PDF version you said.
Right.
I know.
He says it
I
right.
know, he has a different, yeah. But what my point is, in the event of impasse, each party retains the right to identify issues that are in dispute for purposes of arbitration. That's really the bottom line. We're gonna have a discussion throughout, and maybe at the end, and maybe on the last day, or whatever. And if we agree, then we submit that agreed set of issues for dispute
so
resolution.
you go with that wording there?
If not, you have the prerogative to say, well, you don't agree with me about this, but this is an issue that goes to the arbitrator, so do we.
Right.
So we're on the same page
So we agree
100%
with this
about that.
wording.
Well, we don't think the last sentence is necessary. I'm not sure we won't be willing to include it, but that's why we took it out.
Well, you took it out after you laid it out, is another issue.
That's true.
Yeah, and we'll do the same thing at some point unintentionally. I'm just saying that's something we gotta be very cautious about.
Okay, and that's why I came out, and told you this version we're printing is probably different than the last one you
You did,
saw.
I thought but I understood this other part, where there was a section you changed in the strikeout piece and put back, but,
And so, do you think that the last part there about tentative agreement not used to show it's not in dispute, because I think that we are 100% in consensus that
Yes,
you,
we
that
do.
you have the prerogative to choose to take an issue to arbitration. And so do we.
Yes.
Okay, and so I'm not gonna argue and you're not gonna argue. Well, you signed this, and so it's not in dispute.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We
So
just think
that's-
there's some value in meeting at the end and discussing it, because maybe we will inform each other of something that does or does not need to go forward.
Okay.
I just think that's
That's fine.
we're ahead of this gigantic thing. Let's just make sure we're all kind of on the same page as much as we can be.
That's fine, we'll put the sentence back.
Yes.
And then, I didn't touch on this, I don't know what's going on. But,
Can we change computers?
the other part I had a question on was 6, and you laid it out right. And, well, you didn't emphasize a piece of this that we didn't see either going over. We kind of fixated on either party may argue if the recording is accurate. What you're actually saying above is that the official recording will be yours, but we can argue that ours is okay too. And I thought the agreement at the table was that either one can be used and argued as the official, to the arbitrator to show evidence. Because that's the whole intent of what we're trying to achieve.
So Lowell, if I might.
Yes, certainly.
So official can mean many things. We agree with that in relation to the arbitrator, that either one could argue that. But in the meantime, we have public information requests, we have this and that. And if we're, handling the official for those purposes, we were just gonna use ours for those purposes. When it comes to arbitration, all bets are off. You can argue yours, we can argue ours. We can argue yours, you can argue.
So because you're
however,
calling
so-
your copy the official copy, that wouldn't be an argument you'd make for the arbitrator. We can't use their stuff because ours is the
No,
official copy.
absolutely.
Not at all.
Okay,
Not at all.
good enough. then.
And that's exactly the reason that we had official in there, because we'll get PIA requests, and the only one that's the city's official one is the one we made.
And I didn't consider that, so that makes sense. So
Yeah.
either one can use either set of data.
Yes.
You're not gonna try to use the word official as something that,
That's
as
correct.
an argument, you can't use our data.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, let me have you explain something to us, because in the exchange recently of the videos, you indicated that y'all were doing some cleanup or whatever. Tell me what kind of modification is going on the real-time recording on your
Yeah,
tape, because we're not
yeah.
making any.
No, as you can tell, we spent a lot of money on this, so we've got, software that we can actually change what you say. If we thought that would be of value to us, our operations. No, but, what we're doing.
Aha! Now I
I
get
said
it.
it out loud, oh crap. The guy that was here before, Mike Lynn, used to be a sound engineer in LA, so he made a template that will take out the frequencies of the fan and boost the volume slightly. And that's all, that's the only modification.
Just regular FBI stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I mentioned too.
All right, and obviously, we can do our own comparisons and so forth, but, we're interested. There's nothing wrong with having two versions of the same thing. You can always have a glitch, you can always have whatever, and, we'll just both pay attention to that record.
If you find a difference, then we roll the R on the matrix, because we're not changing content, we're just recording what's yours.
Pretty good.
Then, so we changed that 9 to 11, and I'd like to have the parties added back in, so we kind of formalize a meeting at the end to meet and confer. Doesn't mean we have to agree, right, but to meet and confer. We're ready to TA.
We're good?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, based on that ground rules approval, we have Article 5 and Article 6 and Article 20 that we believe are TA. And that's the version that we sent to them last, correct?
Okay, there's just no changes in
It
5,
just stays
6.
Okay, the ones you sent to us, no changes in those.
So, record those.
Certainly 5, 6, and 20. And we're working pretty much on 10, it's still under review, but those 3 are in TA status.
Okay, I'll confirm that through email and bring back next.
So what do you contemplate for today? Are y'all gonna continue to work internally? Do you have something for us today?
We were looking at the drug testing policy or the article, and we've been following what's happening in EMS. we have a grievance filed on, use of THC, and it's in abeyance, so we really started looking at the EMS, proceedings. Look like that would be cleaned up pretty well if we get something similar. So we had, our attorney take the TA that you guys had, I believe, if any part of this wrong, let me know, but the TA that you guys have with, EMS and move it into our old, Article 24, drug testing. And, we were going over that, and there's a couple of questions we had about, I talked about in the hallway about, we'd like to get more information on saliva testing. I used to think it was very reliable, and I've heard some other things, it's not quite, but I don't know the truth, so if you have any resources.
Okay, so let us talk internally about the data that we have and what's been exchanged and so forth, because as I indicated to you, I had very limited involvement in that.
Yes.
And so what I think that you're saying is that right now, even though it's not finalized, you're contemplating a proposal that will pretty much track what's happened so far.
Our intent is to track it as close as possible.
Right, and you're just doing kind of the due diligence on making sure you understand what that looks like and how it plays out.
That's correct.
Okay.
But I do have a specific question, and it may not be able to answer at the table, but on testing for vehicle accidents, my understanding is it's not compelled unless two conditions exist. So you get a vehicle accident, that'd be one condition, I guess, three conditions. And the other one is you have a visual verbal impairment, for some reason notice, and that you have a test to test for the specific substance for impairment, not just metabolites or past use or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that pretty close?
No, that's not true.
We'll talk about that internally, but I think that that's oversimplified.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't think there is a test that tests for intoxication for marijuana. There's just no such thing that exists, so, yeah, but we'll talk about what we did. I will tell you, however, I don't know what the city wants to do with the firefighters, but I will tell you that part of the reason we agreed to something with EMS, where some of your folks and police will definitely differ, is federal law and people who carry firearms. That is a non-starter under federal law, so when police gets to drug testing, they will not get that article. Right, to the extent we're willing to give it to firefighters, it will not apply to
Drivers.
to arson and
Right.
to anybody else who's.
Oh, the
who
firearm
may-
piece of the puzzle,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But then we have the DOT piece as well, as long as we're consistent with that, but we think that we are.
Right, because I don't think these guys are commercial drivers, but yes. So.
And is that, you made it sound like that's pretty solid, and I thought there was some murkiness in the law in that, but it sounds like you guys' position, that's a pretty solid position.
On the firearm piece,
Yeah, on the firearms.
I think so.
Okay, and I'm just asking,
Yeah,
I'm trying to understand your position.
Absolutely. And the impairment piece, I don't know what the library has been. I know that they have had a number of consultations. But I think that what Devin said is a pretty accurate statement of the current science. And that is that impairment is not something that can really be determined from a laboratory standpoint.
I think it could be determined from blood sample, but I'm not 100% sure. The reason I think that has been reading reports on THC breathalyzer tests, and they benchmark against blood testing.
Okay.
And they talk about it in the study as if it's a good benchmark, you know?
I mean, the science on that is changing as we speak, but, BAC levels, long established, 0.08, is that no such thing exists, long established at least on the marijuana side, but there is an extra caveat to the firearm piece, which you can talk about it with.
So, traditionally in the fire department, we've allowed, when folks left arson, is that we've held onto their peace officer license. So in that situation, though they're not in arson any longer, since we're keeping the peace officer license, what Devin said about the firearm deal would probably apply to those folks as well.
So as long as they held on the peace officer's license,
Yeah.
they would still be subjected to.
If the city of Austin, the fire department were still carrying their peace officer license, they would be subject to the same as the arson investigators, to where they would probably be exempted out of whatever that policy is, same as PD.
Okay.
Just for clarity.
No, that's good information. I'm not saying we agree or disagree, but it's really good information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and from our side, I'm not saying that's our offer. I think we need to talk about, we need to see what you guys want and talk about it internally, but I did want to clear up that, yeah, that's, at least to our comfort level, there is no such test that would test for impairment in the marijuana.
So would that mean you wouldn't be testing for marijuana?
We do test for marijuana. And
Oh, okay, I thought,
if that proposal were to go through with EMS, for marijuana, yes, that was one of their requests, was that you stop testing for marijuana, but that was not enough, that was a non-starter for the city. So the issue was, we will still test you. You're showing signs of intoxication, we're gonna test you, and if you have metabolites, and it's up to us to prove that that was the reason you're intoxicated, and you're.
well, I need to confirm the copy that I got that I thought was the working TA, because it might have been the wishful TA and not the real TA.
Yeah.
I think the language I have says a little bit different, so I need to confirm my language.
No problem, good question.
No, you gave a lot of great information right now, to help us, appreciate it.
Anything else for today? Not good.
What time are we at?
2:06.
Okay, well, at the very least, we're gonna get these, 5, 6, and 20.
Yes.
We'll confirm that they're ready for TAs on our side. And we are ready for TA on the ground rules,
We'll get those
under the
ready.
conditions we set. And we'll continue to look at other articles. Obviously, we have some articles from this morning that you returned that we were going to remain in conflict for a while, and that's kind of common in this sort of environment. And we'll just keep track of those, and you guys will too. We'll bring them up occasionally until we can persuade you to go our way, and then, we'll move on. That would be great. So.
And you can continue to labor under that misimpression. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know how we are. We imagine all kinds of things. Just, no, it sounds good.
Good deal.
Appreciate
Thank you. Likewise. We appreciate you.